So I'm going to move this over here. I like to move around. I got a lot of energy, I guess, as people say. And so I'm going to talk to you in a nonlinear form. And but I will give you some structure. But I wanted to kind of give you the title and what we're going to be kind of talking about and how I got to be involved in this. So my name is Anthony Nocella, professor at Hamline University. And recently this book came out. And I'm really excited about it, Earth, Animal, and Disability Liberation, the rise of the ego ability movement. So if I can like see hands or wiggles or whatever from people that understand or know or heard of the term called ecofeminism. Okay, cool. So in that same breath, we're kind of trying to do the same thing in making an radical intersectional connection between disability liberation and animal liberation and earth liberation, right? And there's already people in this room that are like doing these kind of things, and there's a journal issue that's coming out that's going to be speaking about these things too. And then, so we critique the environmental movement on how it's ableist, but we also critique the animal rights movement on how it's ableist. So we, heard from, my dear friend Breeze on how the movement is racist, right? And this is kind of the work that we do too, and I really wanted to kind of speak to that at the very end, which kind of falls into the realm of prison abolition. And I think maybe you have to wiggle this every so often. You have to sit here and just wiggle it. Okay. So, before we go to my, do you want to go to my computer? No, okay. You're like, no. Okay. So, yeah.
Never.
There we go. I'd say like 30 minutes. So I'll just keep on going. So we start critiquing it just like Bree started critiquing the animal rights and environmental movement. Well, not the environmental movement. A number of other people have done that, like the rise of the environmental justice movement started critiquing the racist politics, like Sierra Club not allowing people of color and women till the late 1950s, right? Saying, you have the great Edward Abbey, the father of Earth First, saying that, people that were black had smaller brains, right? And believing in eugenics and they were closer to apes, right? And so we have to see how even the revolutionary environmental groups and the lobbyist groups have perpetuated in some way a racist framework, right, through the environmental movement. So I'm going to kind of talk about ableism and how it's being done, and how we, even today in this room, are perpetuating it, right? And oh, we got to slide it up. Okay. So, a little cartoon, because I like cartoons. If being normal is natural, why is it such a strain? And normal isn't natural, right? And that's kind of the foundation of the eco-ability concept, is that normal is a social construction perpetuated by white supremacy, patriarchy, heteronormative agendas, and Christian values, European education, et cetera, right? All these very oppressive institutions and industries and systems of domination, as bell hooks would say, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about critical animal studies. My story, my activism, coming from like a feminist analysis. I think I should start with myself and then kind of go and talk about, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about why I've got this little book up here, which I have a chapter in, that's why, so to keep you not. I just saw this getting dark, so. My story, first, critical animal studies, it started in 2007, 2006, and the whole idea, really short, is that it's not just about non-human animals, right? Anybody that does critical animal studies makes an intersection with all oppression, and really genuine, not like going to the Critical Resistance Prison Abolition Conference and handing out why vegans to try to make black liberationists vegan, right? No, to try to make you, a less of an anti-racist, or going to a queer rally and truly being there for queer liberation rather than passing out literature on veganism. Does that make sense? So really, truly, genuinely being in other struggles and having somebody say to you 1 minute, are you vegan? And having that question you because you do so much activism in another movement, right? And so critical animal studies or critical animal theory demands you to be in other movements. You can't do one issue. And as we are today in activism and theory, with the breakdown of classic disciplines, the breakdown of single issue movements, we have to be interested in other things, right? Women and gender is not enough. We have to focus on women, gender, transnational feminism, and anarchism. And that's what dissertations, masters, and then that's what, progressive papers are looking at, and scholars are doing. They're trying to make these connections. And where they're not connected, you try to make them. And I even gone to the farthest extent and was not accepted to a feminist conference, which I won't say which feminist conference, but I made the connection between critical animal studies and critical alien studies. And they're like, what? And I won't talk about that. But trying to make the connection that we have to decenter ourselves. And yeah, I do believe in aliens. I'm not so self-centered to not, right? We did believe in the world was flat at one time and people were killed to think otherwise. So my activism really is entrenched in my disabilities. At a very young age, I was diagnosed having severe disabilities, put into special ed, 1st to 4th grade. They didn't have Ritalin back then. I only was introduced to Ritalin when I was a senior, which destroyed my kidney, and I got off of it in a month. And but special ed was a very abusive place. It was the last form, and still is the last form of segregation education, right? We all say that we're against segregation, right? But we still have it fostering and promoted in this if you think differently, we'll stick you in special ed, right? And so there I am, and strapped down to, I see friends and myself strapped down to chairs, strapped down to walls, held down, because we had a lot of energy, right? And then where we go is to the whole idea of going into special private segregated schools, right? The first one was called a laboratory, and after two years, and I found a fond love towards the Animal Liberation Front, and because they couldn't speak and they don't have a voice, they just liberate non-human animals from abuse. And I started understanding why the Animal Liberation Front, and other oppressed groups did what they did in such an extreme way, because they didn't have a voice, or if they did have a voice, it was through their actions, right? And so Temple University Laboratory, where I was for a few years, was closed down because of property destruction. Half the building was burned down because there was this outrage and anger with the students not being appreciated and respected. Does that make sense? And so later, the walls and the doors of Temple University were literally, laboratory, were literally turned into prison doors, right? So that was my first experience of okay, there's something going on here. Then I went to Houston, Texas. My family moved from Philly to Houston, Texas. And then in Houston, Texas, I was in another segregated school, very expensive segregated school. Then I started understanding what it means to be white and what it means to be wealthy. And then where did all my friends go that were in special ed that were public, right? All my kids, friends of color were in special ed public schools, right? Being warehoused while I was in this private rich school, right? And only, small schools, segregated, 13 kids graduating, medication, counseling for every kid, etc., right? Still didn't know how to learn, read and write. Was running up and down the halls. Couldn't sit still. Every time I got frustrated, I broke something. I broke so many things in my house that my parents kept me out of the house from 9 to 5, right? Until I got home, right? We have to. So this is where I'm coming from. This really frustrating perspective. And so in 11th grade, I got into animal rights, right? And then I started learning how to read, the, is, dog, all these things. And, but I was like, when I started learning all these things, I'm like, Peter, no, I'm not gonna hug no bunny, I'm not gonna hug any dog, I'm not gonna do anything cute. It's like, this is not me. I don't wanna cause damage. And